Hey, two quick things before we start this video. The first one is I have my first OP08 tournament this Sunday, September 29th. Signups go live on the 23rd, so today, a couple hours after this goes live at 11 a.m. PST or 2 p.m. EST. Links in the description if you guys want to check it out and just know when the signups go live and everything else. And then also, Sleeve Chief has a new product drop for their Mr. Cotton Candy sleeves. They're super duper nice. You can even see on this video, the foilings for these are very special. So make sure to check it out. You can use my link in the description and use the Eggman for 5% off. So that's going to be it, and enjoy the video. Hey everyone, Eggman here with another video, and we're already 1 week into the OP08 meta for the English version of the One Piece card game, and we've got quite a bit of data that I want to go over in this video, specifically just some quick tournament recaps. We've got a lot of data from TCG Matchmaking as well, which I really appreciate, some example deck lists, and then also an updated tier list at the end, comparing and contrasting my thoughts when the meta just came out compared to where we're at right now. So if you guys are new to the channel, please make sure to hit that like and subscribe. I really do appreciate it, and make sure to check out my website, events, which all of this is going to be there, and it's just a really good resource for this game in general. But jumping on into this one, I also do want to thank TCG Matchmaking for collecting and releasing all this data. I'm also a Patreon of theirs on Patreon, and you guys can check out their site. They have just a bunch of good data there, and I would not be able to do half this stuff without them as well. So also check out their Discord. They also have like a ranked ladder for that as well, and some of their own tournaments which you guys can check out too, which I think is really, really helpful. But we have this, and if you guys want any of this, I'm going to be updating it whenever they update their power rankings here on my website too, so you can check out the on the front page of the OP08, there's the staff deck list up here, as well as the TCG Matchmaking power rankings. So and some events that we're going to go over real quick. So I already made videos about these individually, but TAC had two tournaments in the last week. One was an online treasure cup as well as an offline regional. So we can see like what decks are doing well in general. Again, you can check out the videos that I did in particular, but I do want to note that the Black Yellow Luffy is doing very good. I think it's probably one of the best leaders in this format in general. Rob Lucci also doing very well, being able to win the most recent event, the Online Treasure Cup. But we do have decks like Zoro being able to make an appearance. We've got the Star Deck Luffy 14 as well, seeing some good result, but then just a good amount of variety too. I think the only other leader I think has been like represented a little bit more is Nami, but there's still a lot of viable leaders I think that are existing right now. But I do agree that like Black Yellow Luffy and Rob Lucci are definitely kind of like on the upper edge as well. It's just like the standard Star Deck 14 Luffy. They probably have a little bit more of an edge in this format too. And looking at the power rankings released by TCG Matchmaking as well, we can see just kind of how a lot of these decks are stacking up on the rank ladder. Now, a couple of things I do want to mention for this is that you can look at the number of matches, and also the win-loss rate is a good indicator for some decks, but I will say, like, you look at the bottom here, Star Deck 13 Luffy is at the bottom of this list right now, and Nami too. Two very good leaders that were doing very well in the end of the OP07 meta. And I think something I want to kind of think about this data and my own interpretation of it is that these are not just like ranked matches in the sense like, you have to qualify X amount of games or something. These are literally anyone playing these leaders. So I do think that Star Deck 13 Luffy is a very difficult leader to play correctly. And because of that too, it might be like a little bit lower on this like power rankings because of that. And this is kind of an idea to go into this. Yes, Zoro is doing really well. It's the highest win rate, but I also think it's the deck that has like the lowest amount of kind of like variance or like playstyle, right? You just kind of go aggressive with it. It's still a deck that's good, and you still have to be skillful for it. But if you compare Zoro to Luffy, right, the skill level, I think there's a gap. There's a gap between the skill level of those two decks comparatively. So if you don't think that's right, let me know. But that's kind of my mentality going into and my experience with this meta and both those decks. But of this, we do have Zoro with a 57% win rate. Luffy, Star Deck 14, just under 56%. We have Rob Lucci with the 55.8. Katakuri getting a little bit more popular with the 54.5. We have the Bonnie with the 52.3 and Kagari just above that 50% win rate. And then of the under 50%, we've got Pudding, Reiju, Nami, and Luffy from Star Deck 13 once again. So I don't think these are necessarily too surprising of like 10 of the best leaders in this game. These are all decks that are on my radar. I think the only ones is that I would say Calgar is like maybe, this is probably about right. I think 50% is about where I see it as a deck in general. I think Pudding is a little bit matchup dependent. It's really polarizing for a lot of it, which we can see in a little bit. And then you also have like Reiju, which I thought was going to be doing a little bit better in this meta, but from like the tournaments we've seen from Oceania, and also what it is, it's still a solid deck, and it's likely doing better now than when Red Purple Law was around, but it's still, I don't know, it's still kind of missing a little bit of something. It's just really mid-range, but if you get to the late game, you're not doing as much as kind of the other decks too. So these are their power rankings, and also they do have a matchup spread too. So we do see from the same list of leaders here that Zoro has a pretty even matchup into everything that isn't black. So we do have Luffy, Moria, as well as Rob Lucci being its rougher matchups for it here. We also have a Nell be pretty tough for it, since it's really hard for you to do 3 damage sometimes. And unlike like Red Purple Law, I think Zoro does run out of steam a little bit, but I also don't think a Nell is as in this meta as it previous was. We also do have Stardeck 14 Luffy. Only rough matchup is potentially Rob Lucci, right? Because it has a little bit more removal. And the purple Luffy and Nami. I do think Nami's... you're not fast enough to beat Nami, but otherwise a very kind of favorable matchup spread here too. Rob Lucci, same kind of way. Even like I would say this is still like winnable, right? It's 50% with Katakuri. Probably the evenest matchup spread across the way. Nothing that it's like superbly good against, except for maybe the Bonnie, right? And also the Zoro, since you get so much removal. Like, since you can play the 4-cross Lucci, and it's just easy for the deck to do, you just kind of eat that matchup alive. But you do have a terrible matchup here, though, into the Black Yellow Luffy, which, as you can see, is really, really tough for you. Katakuri, generally across the board. Bonnie, we start to see a little bit more red. Kalgara, a lot of like rough ones, especially like Gekomori. I can see this one being really tough. And also the Rob Lucci, because they can still remove a lot of what you can do. We have the Pudding here, which does have like a good matchup against Nami and the Black Yellow Luffy, but other than that, I think a lot of the matchups are pretty tough. I can definitely see why Zoro is really tough for this deck in a lot of ways, and everything else, you're just kind of like -1, right? It's like a 45-55 for most other matchups, which seems kind of rough. Reiju's kind of like in the same way. Only difference is that you are good against Pudding, and but you are like, you're trading off that Black Yellow Luffy matchup. Nami, pretty good except for the aggressive decks, right? So like Zoro is pretty tough. Moria can be pretty tough because they establish bodies pretty often. Kalgara, same way, because of that too. But then also you do have some good favorable matchups in like the Rob Lucci, the Stardeck 14 Luffy, and then like the Stardeck 13 Luffy as well. And lastly, the Stardeck 13 Luffy, you do have some really good matchups across the board. Bonnie is still really tough for it, 100%. Stardeck 14 Luffy, I think, is just like a -1. I think like Lucci, you win. This deck can do other things that make it a little bit tougher. Zoro can, you're still a 4-life leader, and even though like you're 9k, I think Zoro can have like Janbei and stuff that can be really awkward for you. And then Nell, which is in around like these 3 decks, not as worrying, but and then like a minus on the Nami matchup. So I still think Black Yellow Luffy is a really good deck, but you definitely have to be a good pilot, because you do have some of these unfavorable matchups you kind of have to get out over on the other side. So but of these 10 leaders that they put on their power rankings, we do have the highest win rate based off of that. So these aren't necessarily games that have been, decks that have been tested out like mass. They've probably been played around 200-ish games and had like a favorable win rate, but I do want to go over them really quick. So not like an individual, but individually, we're just going to go over all 10 very quickly. So Zoro, this is a deck that wasn't on my radar. I don't think it wasn't doing anything with Red Purple Law around, but since that's gone and there is that space, the animal build for this is really, really strong, with the Tony Chopper. Being able to establish essentially 2 bodies over 2 turns is really, really good. And if they don't get rid of it, you get that bonus there too. We also do have the hiking bear, the Tony Chopper. Like this is just like a really nice little package for it, and then also the shut up and come with us. So being able to use that to place cards on your opponent's turn for 1 is really nice. Even though it's random, you can miss because we don't have a lot of animals. We're only playing the 18. There are a lot of good targets for this as well. And then top end, a lot of people were playing like the dragon, but there's also the silvers here, which I don't think is a terrible card. It can help you just get a little bit of removal, but also, you know, especially since you're going to have like a kind of wide board of like a lot of weenies, this can trade in really nicely into some things, and just not a card that I've seen a lot of it. So there's a Zoro there. Luffy, pretty standard. I'm surprised to see like the one that is doing well is playing the Thousand Sunny, since this build isn't playing a lot of the Straw Hats, only playing the Brook, the Sanji, as well as the Robin. But these are like the good cards that we have for the deck, mostly leaning more into the Navy package, which I'm more used to. I do like the Kaido, and I do also think there's like an Animal Kingdom Pirates build of this deck in general. But the fact that this puts a card into the trash and not KO it means it's really good for like mirror matches or getting rid of Sabos, and it's a 9-drop 9k, so you're not even like upset for playing this card either. So I do like the idea of this card, and my only worry is that this deck is running 22 non-counters, which is a lot, which is kind of scary in sometimes, especially since we're playing the Thousand Sunny, which I don't know. I don't know if we would need to play this when we're playing so few of these, but this had the highest win rate, so there it is with the Luffy there. Rob Lucci, nothing too wild here. I do think like Jack is a good card, but it's definitely not something you need to like auto 4 of. So I do respect that there's only 2 copies of this. I do like the 6 King pistol in this too, and then just a lot of cost reduction. So nothing too wildly changed. Who's also just a good card since it is a former Cypher Pull, so you can use that to additionally get like some synergy, but also it has a really good trigger off of life, and sometimes you just want to play it to get rid of a 3 cost or lower, which also is just a 4 cost or lower with the Rob Lucci effect. So there it is there. Katakuri, the only like real change for this deck has been the Nami. You can use this card to trash a card from your hand to KO something, so kind of like a more aggressive version of Gadatsu, which we're still playing this card, but the fact that we don't have to worry about hitting them down from like 4 life to 3, we can still get rid of 4 cost and do a lot of damage with this Nami. So obviously you need to trash a card with trigger in your hand, but that's not too worrisome since we're playing a good amount of those anyways. So it's a really good trade for you too. You also just get to use the on-play effect. You don't get to play it, which would be kind of busted, but being able to use this to get rid of a 5 or less off of life is pretty good too. So this is Katakuri. I think it's better than Pudding right now. Even though I really like Pudding and what it does, the fact that you get to be like a little bit more aggressive leaning, I think is better than the fact that you get to the 10 drop like a turn earlier. I think the trade-off is just still better being a 5 life and being aggressive while doing so. But this is the build here for Katakuri. Bonnie, I've been liking this deck a lot. Biggest ad for this is just Carrot. This card is really good in conjunction with the Bonnie leader effect. It can also be played off the Rosinante, which is really good. So I think the deck is just strong, and it's a good consistency piece and reason to play like a more 5 drops package. So I think that's really good. Kalgara, I'm not like the hugest fan of this deck, but when I did play it, this was pretty close to the build I was running. The only like new card I wasn't was this Rocky, so this is from OP06. It just becomes blocker, right? It's a 1-drop blocker as long as you have another Shendoran Warrior out, which is not too terrible. You could also play this on like turn 1, so if you want to attack with Kalgara immediately, you can do that too. It's like since it's a 1 or less, so there are some weird times where I do just need to play another body out or be 1 less, so I can be in the 200 million volts range. So being able to do that is helpful. But in general, I'm not a huge fan of this deck. I do think like a 50% win rate is where it kind of lies, and you can have some really, really good turns, but the consistency with the deck is kind of weird with so many of your pieces like bottom decking your other pieces, which is really rough. Next up is Pudding, and I've been trying this deck quite a lot in my own testing, and this is an okay build. I think the big differences that I've been seeing or been doing is that, one, I've never seen anyone play the 7-cost Linland, but I do agree that it can be a good card. Putting some good aggression on your opponent is really, really nice. It can also be more easily accessible when you play stuff like Viola on turn 2, which I wasn't the biggest fan of this card. I'm playing like 2 copies of it now. It's fine. It's a blocker. That's more of the big thing. I kind of want to look at playing Shirahoshi as well, but since this can bottom or like face down your life, it just means that you can use it to use your Pudding effect again, which is kind of nice. But in general, I think this deck is kind of in a rough spot. We're also playing like the Pero Sparrows. This is a bit of a wackier build. I definitely have to try this because it's playing a lot of cards that I'm not. But it's a little bit more aggressive leaning, again, with the Sparrow being able to come out, with the Linlin being able to use this to, it's a good 7 cost play. And then we have like the Linlin and the 9 and 10. So no aces either, which is kind of interesting for me. So we also have the Conquest of the Sea, which is some good removal. Only 1 copy of it, but you can use that to clear some wider boards as well. So I don't know. I think this deck is interesting. This build in general is a really interesting one, and I definitely have to try it. But there it is there. All right, next up is Reiju. Nothing too crazy for this one. The kind of ads that I don't normally see are, one, we're playing Black Maria, which this card is good, and also can have some weird stuff in like the mirror match as well. Being able to go down to the number of Dawn as your opponent means that if you do use this, you can get that advantage. Also, you can just kind of go aggressive on your own, since you can use it off Porsche and then just gain a bunch of Dawn. So I think that is really helpful for you. We're also playing the Black Bug too, which is some good removal. It bottom decks a card, so you can get rid of a Sabo, which otherwise would be tough for this deck to answer. So I think that's a good card for this. And bottom decks it too, which is nice because it takes it out of rotation. So in general, I think this deck can do something in this meta, but it's not one that I've been testing quite as much. And but we do get like that little. I think Black Maria is definitely a boon for this deck, and it really helps it out too. So this is the Maria build. Nami. This one's not too wild. This is almost exactly what I see all the time. The biggest difference is like 2 copies of Hanger, just in case the mirror match comes around, because it's kind of the breaker for that. But other than that, it's Nami. I don't know what to say. It's been looking like this pretty much forever. Not forever, since OP07 came out. So, and I don't think it's changing in the next little bit until it gets actual support printed in OP09. But we'll talk about that closer to OP09. And then lastly, Black Yo Luffy. I think this is honestly where a lot of decks have kind of devolved into, using like 1 10-drop Guzan just to say that you have it in case you need it, which is nice. I really like the Finger Pistol. It really helps the deck out in a lot of matchups too. 4 Kuzans have been pretty standard in a lot of builds right now as well. Swag copy of Sabo, the 1-0s of the Aces, and then the 3 Brothers Bond and the single Ice Age. So looking a lot like Jackson's list that he won the North American Finals with this month too. So not too surprising, and this is the builds here. All right, and finally we've got the updated tier list for this one, and this is not it. This is my tier list that I made at the release of OP08, so a little bit more of like the theory. We didn't have any results to really base this off either, so just my own personal play testing and talking to others as well. And I think it was all right. I think it was fine for where we were at based on data. And here's the one that I have currently based on my own experiences and the data that we currently have as well. So good by default are decks that I would expect to top most regionals, if not every regional. Size event likely good. They can top. I wouldn't be too surprised, but I also wouldn't be surprised if it missed a week or two. Star deck waiting room. Some of these decks are still good, and I kind of had a weird issue of like Doflamingo, Boa, Katakuri, and Marco. These 4 are still like viable right now, but I think they get a little bit better with the star deck. So I kind of want to mention that. But these 4 specifically, the top 4, you can definitely run right now, and I think to some good success. And then just unlikely, and then banned or unreleased. So, but yeah, good by default. I think it's pretty clear that Rob Lucci, Black Luffy for star deck 14, and Black Yellow one for star deck 13. They're all super solid decks, and honestly, these 3 might be a little half tier above the rest, if I'm being super honest, but they're all very viable, and they're going to be doing very well in this format in my experience. We've got Zoro, Nami, and Bonnie kind of as the bottom 3 of this tier. I think Zoro is just going to be the premier aggro deck at this point, based on my own testing and seeing people play it. It might get a little bit worse when people kind of remember how to play against Zoro, or just kind of make some adjustments to their decks to answer this deck. But I think right now it's going to be a very strong deck that's going to be very present as well. Nami's just going to be around forever. Bonnie is probably the weakest and can maybe even jump down to likely good, but we'll keep it here at good by default. I do think it's a strong deck in this meta in general, and it just we haven't had a lot of data for it, but I think it's still good. And then likely good, we've got Moria, Reiju, Kalgara, Pudding, the Kaido, Perona, and Anel as well. And this is moderately ordered. Also, if I was to put Marco, I'd probably put Marco Boa and Dofi right here, and also the Katakuri in between, like where the Pudding and Kaido are. I'm just gonna put them back here, but they definitely can top. I expect them to moderately top until they get the star decks, and then they top a little bit more afterwards. But I think these are all solid decks. We haven't seen Kaido yet, so this one might be my own personal project here, but I do think he is very viable in this meta too. And then Anel has kind of fallen off a little bit. I don't think he's as good as where he was in OP07. It could also just be people are trying out the new stuff in other decks first and maybe coming back to Anel eventually, but I think he's a little bit less good than where he was. So star deck waiting room, I think honestly all these are fantastic leaders right now too, but I just want to emphasize that they do get better when we get the star decks at the end of October. And then these ones, I'd be very surprised if any of these top. Unfortunately, I hope King gets better, and I know a lot of people are trying Vegapunk, so maybe these two could get a little bit more supported, and maybe Uta will get better with the star deck that people will play it, but I'm just going to leave it here. So this is my tier list, and this is the video as well. If you guys want any of the deck lists, any of the data that you guys saw from this video, make sure to check out my website, Eggman Events, in the description. Make sure to check out my tournament. Make sure to check out Sleeve Chief, and that's going to be it for me. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.